Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be my end of year best worst random awards. So we're going to talk about covers, friendships, vibes, anything that wasn't included in my other end of the year books. So like my most disappointing, most surprising, best and worst books of the year. So we're discussing random awards. So I have a list of questions that I mix up depending on the year. Sometimes I don't have a good answer and sometimes I invent a new question to recommend a book. So let's start with a classic, which is best and worst cover of the year. So I feel like depending on the edition could change my answers, but I tried to stick to the ones that I've actually read. So the best covers, I really enjoyed My Best Friend's Exorcism. I feel like the vibes are just, I don't think I would have picked it up if it weren't for the hype, because I would have been a bit reluctant. Like the vibe, I don't know if it's going to be for me, but I love this cover now. Yes, it totally works for the book. If you want something a bit campy, a bit like making fun of classic horror movies, this was good. I also really like the Memory Police, which I'm usually not a big fan of people on my covers, but this one, it totally works. Like again, it's a vibe, it's a vibe. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to The Wall, which a book with a cow on the cover is not in theory something that I think I would love, but in this case, it really works. I feel like if you have read the book or not, there's a cow in the book, so it kind of works. Claudia, are you glamming the tree again? Yes, she is. She is. Oh my gosh. These cats will be the end of me. You see her? Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, the day after Christmas, because I'm filming this just before Christmas, I'm taking this tree down because I will lose all my hair. Worst cover. I've already had a discussion. I feel like I'm really vocal when I don't like a cover, and then you can tell me in the comment section if you feel the same or not. And a lot of you do like it, but personally I think it's a really ugly cover, but so much so that it's not that bad. You know what I mean? In the Company of Witches. Listen, I would see this book randomly somewhere. I would never pick it up because it's bad. It's so bad. And book 2 is no better. I'm going to pick this up so early in 2024 because I really enjoyed this book. It made it to I think my most surprising books of the year, and I still recommend it. Cozy mystery fantasy. It just, small town, some witches, some murder mystery. It works. It works. I really enjoyed it, but this cover is so ugly. One of my missions this year was to try to read more translated work, which I still want to do that. And I also am trying to stop reading Japanese translations because out of like the 20 I've tried, I think there's only one I really enjoyed. But I have two to recommend. The Wall, might as well mention it again. This is a German translation, which I don't think I've read that many, if any, and this was good. Clearly made it to my best books of the year. And another one that made it to my best books of the year is the Neapolitan series. I read book 2 and 3 in that series. There's one more left, and this is translated from Italian. And Chunky, leave the microphone alone. You're very cute, but no. And yes, I am clearly, you're going to hear me talk about the series so much in this video, so I'm just going to stop here. But Italian, both of them have been adapted. So The Wall, there's a movie that is in German. So I managed to find, it was hard. I managed to find a translation, like there were subtitles. But in Canada it is so hard, so hard. It's an older movie, but yes, I would recommend reading the book over watching the movie just because a lot of the story happens in, like, it's her in her head, like she's alone trying to survive. So like, but the movie is good. It's not a bad adaptation. And then the Neapolitan series, even though once again I would recommend reading the books because I mean you're on here so you like books too. But I 100% believe this is a fantastic adaptation. I have not finished it because, again, I don't want to spoil myself from the last book. But I've watched more than the first season, and so far it's fantastic. It is in Italian, so subtitles once again, but absolutely worth it. It was so, so good, and I can't wait to finish it, but I need to read the last book. So I always like whenever you find really good books that have been adapted really well too. It's just... Oh, books that I have like mixed feelings about. So basically the idea was really good, but the way they went about it wasn't really, you know, like it felt to be well executed basically. So I have two I wanted to talk about. Shout out to Kaiju Preservation Society because this was funny at first, but then it became too much. Long story short, we have this person, which I didn't notice that the main character had like they them pronouns. I noticed at some parts of the books, but I thought it was just confusing. I thought it was like whenever we would get a bunch of the other scientists, I was like, first off, they could be the same person. They just are not different enough. But I wasn't sure what was going on. I did read that person as a man. I'm just gonna say it. Stop eating the lights, you dumb. You're such a silly goose. You're such a silly goose. I expected better from you. I expected better from you. Like, Charlie could do that, but you? Clawdia, I swear. Every day. Every day. She's okay. They're now locked out because I cannot deal anymore. It's coming down right after this video, I'm telling you. So, Preservation Society. Okay, I really enjoyed the premise. The main character ends up having to go and work taking care of kaijus, which are essentially Godzillas, in a parallel universe throughout the pandemic. It was a vibe. My only complaint is that I didn't care about the action. And I've realized that I enjoy cozy books a lot more than I expected, because I feel like this could have been a really good, cozy, funny sci-fi. That's it. But no, we had to try and save the world. I didn't care. I really didn't care about that part. So funny premise, interesting premise, but just the execution for me. Same thing with the change. Is that an unpopular opinion? Because at first I was all for it. You have these women, they're getting older, they're so over it, confirming society, and like it feels very feminist, kind of witchy, and like it starts so good, and then the murder mystery just never ends. It felt so long, and I just eventually kind of lost interest. I didn't hate the book overall, but I feel like the beginning was just so much stronger. And then you have The Measure that made it to my most disappointing books of the year, so not too long, but people receiving a box when they hit, I think it's 22, that tells them how long they have left. And it could have been so good, but it was so boring and character driven, I lost interest. So yeah. Authors that I want to read more from. I think this is one of my favorite categories for the year, because I feel like over the years, I have been discovering authors and I just read more of them in general, so I'd never really had that many good answers, but this year I found so many authors that I actually want to go out of my way to read more from. So obviously Emma Wong, the author of Blood Over Bright Haven. Not going to go into much detail because once again I'm not gonna shut up about this book for the rest of the video, but this is my second book by her and I will be reading more. I'm not really interested in reading the novellas from the other series, but whenever she comes out with another full-length novel, we'll pick it up instantly. And I read P. Jelly Clark, I've read Master of Jinn by him, and I've read a novella, and I have Ring Shout on my TBR for next year, and I just want to read more about him in general. So I was happy with the few that I've read, the full-length novel and the one novella, so I want to read more by them. Sarah Addison Allen, I read Garden Spells by her and First Frost, and I have a couple books on my TBR from her. A few that you guys recommended to me that my library has, so I'll listen to them as audiobooks. I think it's The Peach Keeper, and there's another thing about the moon. They're on my TBR, and then I also already own Other Birds by her, which I will be reading. I'm actually really looking forward to those. My most read author this year is going to be Fonda Lee, which I don't tend to read that many books from the same author over and over again, except like Octavia E. Butler, for example. Like when I choose an author, okay, I love her and I read everything they've ever written. I don't do that super often, but this year Fonda Lee was it, because I read Jade War and Jade Legacy, and then I read a 2 prequel, which were novellas. So does it really count? I don't know. It's 4 books. I don't tend to do that super often, so 4 books seems like a lot to me out of like 100 something. So in the genre or trope that I read the most of this year, I want to say cozy fantasy. I probably just read more like fantasy in general, but it feels too vague. So we're going to say cozy fantasy because I feel like this year was the year that I fully went into it and embraced it and just wanted to read more from that exact trope. So it works. I will be reading more next year. I'm sold. Cozy fantasy girly here. My best sequel. Okay, this is where I start repeating myself for the next 15 minutes. Just be prepared. The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Shocking. I loved it. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the Neapolitan series because, again, I will repeat it 50 times, but they were the best sequels that I've read. Best translation, Neapolitan series. Again, I wanted to rave about that. Most unique premise, I think I'm gonna give it to The Wall. Even though it might not technically be the most unique premise, it's the one that I ended up enjoying the most with a unique premise. So this woman, again, I've talked about it in my best books of the year, but being stuck behind an invisible wall and trying to survive. It's incredibly depressing, which is like right up my alley. And I just really liked it. So yeah, I've embraced it. I like these like survivalist stories, but like I'm very like specific in the kinds that I do enjoy. So this one was it for me. I liked it. So if I had to choose like number one favorite new author, I will give it to ML Wang, even though this is my second book by her, but I feel like this book really solidified her on my will read everything she comes out with list. The books that I was the most emotionally invested in, or series in that case, which look at that, the Greenbone Saga. Listen, I will continue to read about this series because in theory the premise wasn't necessarily right up my alley. Like it seems very like gangster for me, like these two family gangs trying to take control of a city. Doesn't necessarily sound right up my alley. And description, I think people were saying that it's like Godfather with like kung fu and magic, which is like, meh. But the characters are the strength of this series, and I kind of hate the author, so that tells you that she did a good job. So the best short book that I've read, so out of all the short books that I've read, I think the best one is Clawdia by Madeline Miller. I don't think I've mentioned it on any list this year. I just haven't been really talking about it, but it's like 50-ish pages, and it feels weird to include it in my best of the year because I would read anything by her, but I don't feel like it's necessarily the one that really stuck in my mind because it is so short and I'm so picky with short books, but I genuinely think this was well written and enraging, which the author, again, is really good at writing enraging stories, but it's the retelling of, I don't remember the exact name. I'll put it on the screen. But she is a statue that was made by this man, not a great man. She came to life and he's a doo-doo head. And yeah, it was good. So the opposite, the best long book that I've read. It's not the longest book I've read. I think that one is Middlemarch, which was not bad, but not as good as A Day of Fallen Night, which I think is the second longest one. It's like 800 and something pages. It is a chunky book and it was great. I really enjoyed it. It is the prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. So sapphic romance, dragons, interesting world building, magic system, big battle between good and evil, and it was good. And yeah, 800 pages. It was big. It didn't feel big though, which I appreciate that. My most read genre, I just realized I have not been keeping up with my stats this year. I'm gonna have so much fun whenever I prepared that video because I'm gonna have to write down everything, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be fantasy. I have to double check. We'll confirm in that video, I guess, because last year was nonfiction, which was so weird. But I know I have read over 30 fantasy books this year, and I've read 100, I think 6 or 7 books. So like, I'm pretty sure 30-something% is going to be my most read genre. Otherwise, it might be sci-fi, but I feel like I'm finally back to what is normal to me because the last 2 years were weird, but yeah, we're back to fantasy, I think. The best twist. Okay, I'm going to give it to Blood Over Brighthaven. I don't know how much of a twist people will consider it, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I think there were some shocking moments in here at that I really enjoyed, so I'm going to give it to that, so maybe more of you will pick it up. Do it. I don't think I've read that many that were like really awful. I feel like in the past I've definitely did, but not so much this year. Book with the best like group or bands of misfit, friendships. I don't know. I think it's going to be a mix of, again, the Greenbone Saga, which, yes, because the family, and then also Neapolitan, because the friendship between these two girls, they're not always friends, like it's their whole life, so like they do have like frenemies moments, but I like them. I like reading about them. I kind of want to pick up the 4th book, but I'm going to keep it for next summer because it screams summer to me. The book that took me the longest to finish, which is not the same thing as the longest book, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a nonfiction called Woman, Race and Class by Angela Davis. It took me like 3+ months, and that's why I didn't read as many nonfiction this year as last year, because I've read a lot of like really depressing or like heavy hitting books and I couldn't read that many pages every day. So this one took me, I think, 3 months. Yeah, that was a long one. It could have been City of Brass because this was part of my pile of shame and it's been years and years and years, but I tried it for the 3rd time. And again, this is the 2nd time that I put it down 50%. So I didn't finish it. So it can't be that one. So it's going to be Women, Race and Class. I would love to know your answers for that because I feel like it doesn't mean you didn't like it because that one was a 5-star, but took me like 3 months. It's a heavy one. A book you thought you were going to like but ended up being disappointing. I feel that's kind of similar to the other question earlier, but I wanted to also mention The Memory Police because I thought I was going to really love this, and it ended up giving me like, I don't know, like 1984 vibes, but like not in a good way. I really thought I was going to like this because like people are like forgetting things, and it's very much magical realism, which I should have known, but basically people forget what books are, for example, and like it just influencing people, but then some people don't end up forgetting, so there's the memory police. It sounds so good in theory, but again, way too magical realism for me, so it ended up not being that great for me. Ooh, a quick shout out to my favorite video I've posted and or challenge. I feel like I have to give it to my Read It or Unhaul It challenge this year. It has been hard, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like generally it's been really good to declutter my bookshelves, but it's been really difficult on me because sometimes I'm not enjoying myself or sometimes I'm not having a good time. I feel like this year was rough in general for me, so I struggle to post those videos, and not because I know you like it when I'm not enjoying myself and like getting rid of a bunch of books, but sometimes I don't want to share that I'm having a hard time in general in life, so I think I've been struggling with that part. But I think the most entertaining one would probably be the version where I was reading the books you thought I was going to hate. I think that one was a good one. I know there's another one. Was it in July? That I kept putting down books over and over and over again. I know these two were especially popular, and I get it, but my gosh, were they rough to go through. Best world building. I feel like most of the fantasy that I've read this year were not super big on the world building, but I'm gonna give it to A Day of Fallen Night because that's the one that had the most world building. I feel like, if I'm being honest, book one, this is the prequel, book one had more world building than this one, but it's the same universe, so it might cheat maybe, but it's fine. Best character development. It's hard, but I think I'm gonna give it again to Blood Over Bright Haven. I can't say much, but there's a lot of character development in that one. Like unlikely friendship, basically. The book that is the most likely to give me an existential crisis. I have two answers. First off is the Pattern Master series by Octavia E. Butler. I feel like I haven't talked about this series, but I thought it was weird. Actually, you know what? Weirdest book that I've read. This series. It is weird. There's a sexy scene with dolphins. Like, okay, weird. And I feel like she writes in general weird books, but this would not be the first series I would recommend you read. I read 2 books in that series this year, and yeah, in theory, you're following these 2 people that are spending years, their lives, you know, because they have magical power. One of them just can't really be killed, and then one of them keeps changing body and is really evil, and they drove me nuts. And frankly, the good woman, she drove me nuts too, because I feel like grow a spine, stand up. But I get it, but I got so frustrated. So that book, weirdest book and the most frustrating book, but I didn't hate it, and I'm looking forward to continuing. It's Octavia Butler. I will read it. So, but also, I wanted to give a shout out to Le Dernier Jour d'un Condamné by Victor Hugo, which is the last day of a condemned man. This is like a short-ish book, and my gosh, that man, listen, if he wasn't, I would have. It feels dramatic, but that man just, you don't know what he did. You're just following him on his last day before he gets publicly executed. And I feel like that book made me realize how embarrassing that would be. For some reason, like, I never made that connection that it's obviously the point, but I don't know, I hadn't until this moment. And it drove me nuts because his wife, mother, and like daughter come to say goodbye, and he's just making it about himself and like, oh, my mom is gonna die soon, so who cares? She's gonna, you know, her grief doesn't matter. Same with his wife, doesn't really care. He only basically feels bad for his daughter because he's like, well, you know, her father is gonna die. Like, she's an extension of him. So yeah, I couldn't stand that man. So I don't know if I'm forgetting any other books, but these 2 books or series are just sticking out to me right now. Ooh, a book that seems to be the exception on a trope that I am not a fan of. I feel like it's always interesting to see because we all have tropes that we can't stand, and I can't say what without spoiling it. So I'm gonna mention the book, and I can spoil it in the comment section, but the last book in the Fate, the Queen of Tearling series, the last book is The Fate of the Tearling, and the ending, it would be a huge spoiler. It was not the most popular ending, but personally made it to my best books of the year, so it is what it is. 100% exception to the rule. If I had heard what the twist was, I would have not read the series. I wouldn't have, because I, in theory, again, absolutely hate this idea, but it worked. I was not mad about it. So I'm 100% assuming it. I'm okay with saying that I actually enjoyed it this time. Only this time. There are a couple series that I really want to continue. I'm thinking, again, the Neapolitan series. Yes, of course, I have one last book. Whatever. We're going to stop talking about it. But I wanted to also mention The Jasmine Throne, which I read book 1 very recently, really enjoyed it, and finally a fantasy that is not like medieval inspired. I'm so sick of those. And this one is like Indian inspired, and I really enjoy the magic system. I'm really curious. I feel like we don't get enough, but that first book is definitely following this princess that was hidden away as a punishment, and the romance-ish that starts happening with this woman who is forced to go and take care of her. So it's definitely character driven for most of this part, and then eventually things end up opening up. And I feel like the first book ended in a good way, that things should get more and more interesting, like think prophecy, hidden names, and just it sounds good. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series, and yeah, that's definitely on my list for next year. Okay, a book that is objectively not that great, but I personally really enjoyed it. Guilty pleasure, I don't like saying that, but guilty pleasure-ish. I would say For Your Own Good. That book is not bad, but I went into it with zero expectations, which I think helped. Like, if you go into it thinking, oh, Emily gave it 4 stars, I'm gonna enjoy it, you probably won't. Does that make sense? It's kind of dark academia, murder mystery. You're following a character who's a teacher, and he is more than grumpy. He's not a good person, and students are being murdered in the school, so in theory, probably wouldn't be something I would pick up, but I ended up really enjoying it for what it was. So if you go into it with low expectations, you might also enjoy it. Also, quick shout out to The Only Survivors. It didn't make it to my best or most surprising books of the year, but I did enjoy this one. This is by Megan Miranda. She writes a lot of like murder mystery, small towns, and she's not the most like well-loved author, but I've read so many of her books because they tend to be like 3.5 star for me. And I do think this is one of her best books, but a lot of people did pick it up and did not enjoy it. So heads up. But yeah, it's definitely like giving I Know What She Did Last Summer kind of thing. You have these students in high school that went on a trip, and they had 2 vans. They made it to the river. Not everyone survived. And yeah, it comes back to haunt them years later. And I liked it. So I don't care. I don't care. I also wanted to give a shout out to books that I think are underrated, and I went ahead and looked at Goodreads ratings, so anything that had under 10,000 ratings that I really enjoyed. There are some that have like way less ratings, but they weren't favorites, so we're not including those. Quickly, In the Company of Witches that I talked about, it has under 8,000 ratings, so it was published 2 years ago, so it's still underrated, but I think it's going to get more popular. It's great. Blood Over Bright Haven, that I've been mentioning 50 times, it currently only has 2,000 ratings, so I think we can pump up those numbers. Her other book ended up having like, I think 18k ratings so far. It is self-published, so like I feel like 18k is huge, so we can do better. We can do better. Quick shout out to Beware of Chicken, which made it to my most surprising books of the year. Did not think I would enjoy this. Someone from her world ends up being shipped in a magical version of ancient China, and they wake up in the body of a monk, magical monk, and they basically run away to become a farmer. It worked for me, and it has 6k ratings. And then last but not least, quick shout out to Finna, which that one at the beginning was so good. The humor really worked. It's the main character just ended their relationship with their partner, and they're stuck going back to work with them at essentially IKEA. And because they're the most recent employee, they're the ones that are forced to try and go and rescue a customer that ended up like in a wormhole in a different version of her world. I like the beginning more than the whole action portion, but still, it has about 9k ratings, and I think it deserves more love. Now, some that I think are overrated. Quick shout out to some books that made it to my worst books of the year. First one, Hyperion. Why is this so popular? I do not understand. Out of the 6-ish stories that are in there, there are only 2 that were good. One is okay, one was good. And by good, I just mean that it was unique, frankly. And yeah, it was, I don't understand. I really do not understand the hype. And then we have 1Q84. Do I need to say more? Murakami and me are not friendly. I never again. I realized looking back at some of my questions from last year that I did not read that many books with LGBTQ plus representation. I don't know why that happened this year. I feel like past year I had way more. So the best representation, I think I'm going to have to go with A Day of Fallen Night, which has a sapphic romance. I did read a bunch of other books that did have some, but not that many that had, 4 or 5 stars. So even though it's a small portion of the book, quick shout out for that too. Because I'm always struggling to find mystery thrillers that I actually enjoy, I thought it would be funny to include the best one because why not? I think last year my worst genre was thriller, which we're going to look back at that again for this year. It's probably going to be the same thing. I like the idea of thrillers so much and they never work. So murder mystery will have to go once again to In the Company of Witches because it's a cozy murder mystery, but it's still a murder mystery. I feel like the whole oh, the grumpy aunt that is a witch in a small town that people already are suspicious of says that she wishes her client at the bed and breakfast would be dead and then she is found dead the next day, It's fun, okay? Oh, since I mentioned the best series, let me include the best standalones because I feel like not everything needs to be a series. Too many books are series, let's be real. And to make it super different from everything else I've been saying, I'm gonna give it to Blood River Brighthaven. I think we're going to end this video here. If you have any other random awards that you would like an answer for, leave in the comment section and I'll give you my answers. And if you have any great recommendations for any of these questions, leave them once again because I want to know. What's your best covers, especially because I feel like it's really fun to see how different everyone's taste is because I know a lot of you disagree with my hatred of In the Company of Witches cover. But I think it's so bad that it's almost good, especially because I've enjoyed the book. If I didn't, I probably would think it's straight up ugly. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. These were my random awards of 2023. I will be putting on the screen other videos from my end of the year book series. Definitely check those out. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in a coming video very soon. Bye.